Well, apparently we're live again, and welcome to Searching for Sparks. I'm Tim Motzer, and today I'm thrilled to have a chat with legendary bassist Percy Jones. You know him from Brand X, Tunnels, and his current band MJ12, but you also know him from working with recordings with Brian Eno, Jon Hassell. The list goes on and on and on. And I must say that I'm really thrilled also to be collaborating with him in a new project called PAKT, P-A-K-T, which we'll be doing a short mini tour in July. And we have a double album coming out on Moon June Records. So this is all really exciting stuff. And without further ado, I'd love to bring on Mr. Percy Jones.
Hello, Tim.
How are you? How you doing?
Okay, thanks.
It is good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Look to playing in a couple of months.
I was going to ask you, I mean, we haven't seen each other, but even then we didn't really see each other because we were wearing masks. But last August, we did this live stream concert from New York City with you and myself and Kenny Grohowski and Alex Skolnick. And that was the last time I saw you. And you indicated the other day that was the last time you played a gig.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that 9 months ago.
Wow.
So, I mean, I play here at home.
Yeah.
And I've, done a little bit of recording for a few people and writing, but I mean, no gigs per se.
Yeah.
So
we've all been locked in.
So, I hope I can remember how to play.
You can.
It's a long time.
So what have you been doing? I mean, we've all been locked down, and how did that affect you besides live playing? And what kinds of things did you get into during this period of time? So I think we all took like really different journeys.
Well, I definitely had some cabin fever, that feeling of being cooped up. I grew up out in the country, so I'm sort of used to a lot of space. So being sort of cooped up, and I'm not even going to Central Park that much, was contributed to a bit of cabin fever. But I kept busy. I mean, I sit here, practice, try and keep my chops in shape.
Yeah.
But I mean, even that's kind of difficult because you can't beat playing with other people. When you're playing it in a band, it pushes you, a lot more than playing by yourself.
Absolutely.
And mentally, it's more challenging. But I've been writing. I've written a couple of things with Kenny Grohowski, the drummer.
Oh, awesome.
There's a couple of things he gave me some starting points, and then I kind of completed them. And I've also written some stuff on my own. So, I try to keep productive and you're trying to get ready for when things open up.
Yeah.
But I mean, it seems to be, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like you said, we've got a few gigs in the end of July. So that's something to be happy about, because say 6 months ago, nobody knew where it was going to go, this pandemic problem. Yeah.
When you're, we have an echo for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Really? Wow. I'm not hearing anything here.
It's the first time I've experienced this. It just started, so I don't know. But let me see.
It's probably an internet thing. I'm using Fios, which is pretty quick.
Yeah.
Usually. We might have to switch to a shortwave radio or something.
That sounds great. Seeing if this is any better.
Yeah,
Can you?
you sound fine to me. I'm not hearing any echoes, and fidelity is really good.
Yeah, there was a echo in my headset, so hopefully we're good.
Well,
But
interestingly, your audio is slightly out of sync with your video, slightly.
hello.
Yeah, wow. It's like, I'd say it's about 400 milliseconds.
Oh yeah, because I just came off the interface, and maybe I'll go back on for a second and see if that cleared up.
It's not a problem. It's just just something I noticed.
Okay, now I'm back to the interface. It seems to be okay now. Okay. So, I wanted to get back to the collaboration with Kenny and your writing. How do you guys write, and how do you write as a solo person? Are you working?
You mean writing with Kenny or just generally by myself?
Either way, or maybe both. I mean, are you guys sending each other files and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, I mean, when I'm working by myself, I don't have any fixed starting points. I mean, a tune will usually develop from sitting around noodling on the bass or keyboard.
Yeah.
And I'm just playing around until I come, on a good day, I come up with something that sounds like it's got potential. It might be a bass line. It might be a melody. It might be a few chords, a progression, and on some occasions, a rhythm, messing around with a drum machine, a rhythmic thing.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, like I said, there's no fixed method of starting. But whatever it is, I'll sort of try and build on that until I end up with a coherent tune. And I mean, half the time, I get so far, and then it starts sounding like a North Korean tea party, and I have to just throw it out and start again, So it doesn't always work, but generally that's how I sort of write. I don't have a fixed way of doing things. And the stuff I've written with Kenny and also with Steve Moses, actually, in MJ12, they'll send me some drum stuff. And actually with Kenny, there was some keyboard stuff as well. And some of it was quite challenging rhythmically. It was actually quite educating for me to work on that stuff. So I took those sort of starting points that they came up with, and then kind of did my thing on that and took it to completion, And that's nice when you can do stuff with other people, because they come up with something that you yourself would never think of,
Yeah.
So that always makes it interesting.
Yeah, and are you basically recording then into a computer? Is that how you get your lines down?
Yeah, I've got a really old setup here. I use an old Mac G4.
Oh wow!
And a really old version of Pro Tools, a really old version of Logic, and I mean, my stuff it's all old. It's like me, it's all old stuff. But I use Casio synthesizers because I like that sort of phase distortion synthesis.
Yeah.
I mean, it works for me, so that's what I use. I'm not against using up-to-date contemporary equipment, but if something's old and it works, I'll keep using it.
Absolutely, it's one of the things about technology that's kind of a drag, especially with computers, as Apple or whoever it might be is continually upgrading everything, and you feel like you're in this great race, right?
I know. A few friends of mine have complained to me about Pro Tools. Something gets changed and then the hardware doesn't work, and then it turns into a nightmare. So, I mean, that's one advantage of using old software and old hardware is that you turn it on and it works. You're not fussing around with, because it's really horrible when you're in the middle of a tune and you're on a roll and then your gear starts to screw up.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating.
It takes you right out of it.
Yeah, you have to stop what you're doing and then try and fix it, and then it's a distraction. You come back to the music and it's turned into another North Korean Tea Party, so you can't. Yeah. So, yeah, if it works, the old saying, if it works, don't fix it.
Exactly. And I have a lot of old gear too, like that too. But with I'm still running a pretty old laptop and stuff in my studio, and it's working. So I just keep on going. But I'm way out of date with everything, and it's still as solid. So I'm just continuing to back things up.
Well, the old Mac G4 that I've got, a friend of mine in Los Angeles gave it to me. He'd upgraded some time ago to newer stuff, and he gave me his old stuff. And it's actually got quite a lot of horsepower. It's got several processors, called farm cards. So you can mix a record on it. It's got enough horsepower to do that. So, I'm happy with it.
That sounds great. I a part of the show, Searching for Sparks, is looking at artists and kind of chatting about where the first sparks came from, for inspiration for you in music. Usually a lot of the people goes back to their earliest childhood memories of what the first song was or the first musics that got you, and then moving on from that, what got you into wanting to play the bass? So kind of like talking in that general area.
Yeah. Well, when I was really young, I'm talking about sort of 8, 9, 10 years old, I was really into drawing and painting.
All right.
I wanted to be a cartoonist.
Wow.
When I was that age. And in the primary school I was in, one of the teachers who was heavily into art was kind of encouraging me and sort of kept pushing me in that direction. And then in my early teens, I started going to local dances, and this is in mid Wales, which is a very rural area,
Wow.
And I remember seeing there was a band from, I think they were from Hereford, called the Four Aces. And that was a period, like this is the early 60s, when there's that transition from big bands to rock and roll,
Yeah.
So the Four Aces started playing in the area. My parents hated them. Too loud, it was horrible. But I was intrigued. I was especially intrigued by the bass player, and the whole function of the bass. The fact that these big low notes, it made stuff rattle. And I don't know, for some reason, I just got intrigued by the bass, and I'd watch this guy and listen to him, and I thought, well, I'd like to have a go at this. So I had a birthday coming up, and there was a local guy who was in a local band, and he was selling a Vox Clubman bass.
Wow.
Which was a really low, bottom of the line Vox. And he wanted 10 quid. I don't know what's that, $16 or something.
Yeah.
So I talked my mother into, coming up with 10 quid. I bought the bass, and it was a pretty horrible sounding bass. It had plastic machine heads.
Wow.
Which eventually snapped off, So I started playing that, and there were no bass teachers around that area then anyway. The early 60s. You could get piano lessons, but there was nobody who was going to teach you jazz or anything. It was just, my mother played piano and organ. She gave me a few basic sort of lessons, So the only way I could really learn was sort of by rote, by listening to records and listening to the radio.
Yeah.
There was nobody I could turn to for lessons, really. And you have to remember that electric bass playing back then was not at the standard it is now. Now you've got these young guys and girls coming up who are technically really adept,
Yeah.
It wasn't like that back then. So I was pretty much an autodidact, sort of self-taught. And on the radio thing back then, you had the BBC, but their format was sort of top 40, just pop. So everybody was listening to Radio Luxembourg, which the transmitter was in Luxembourg on a continent. So you could only hear it after the sun went down, because the signal had to skip off the ionosphere.
Wow.
They were playing all the cool stuff, all the American rock and roll and R&B. So I used to listen to that almost every night, as did my peers, And I mean, you'd be listening to Chuck Berry or something, and because it would fade in and out, and it got really strong and clear, and then it was like the ocean. You'd go into a dive and it would fade out. You'd be like, just hear a noise and it would fade back. So that's how we used to. And then the radios at that time, little transistor radios that were all analog, so they would drift. The local oscillator would drift, So every 10 minutes you'd have to adjust the tuning to keep it. So all that stuff was going on, and but I was listening to Chuck Berry and Little Richard and a lot of the stuff coming out of the States. So
so this is like what, 64, 65, something like that?
Well, a little earlier. I'd say. Let me see. Just doing the math here. I'd say 62, 63, 64.
All right.
But
wow.
Those 2 or so years, yeah. And then later on, actually, when I was in school in Wales, I was playing with a local band called the Viceroys, and they were doing a lot of R&B, sort of Ray Charles stuff, and so I played with them. Actually started playing harmonica with them really badly. And it switched to bass. So, it was a time when I was trying to learn how to play the instrument, really. And then when I left school, I got a place at the University of Liverpool to study electronic engineering. So I moved up to Liverpool, met some guys there who were players. They were all studying. One guy was studying law, another guy was studying medicine. So we had a band there for a while, and then I got invited to join this band called the Liverpool Scene, which was started out as a music and poetry band. So at that point, that's when I started getting more into more of a full-time musician,
All right.
And I remember doing one local gig in Liverpool. It was a very small room. And I was playing, and I looked up, and right in the front row, one of my lecturers, a guy who taught electronic circuit theory, was sitting right there in the front, like, looking at me, I was thinking, what the hell is he doing here? So the next day, I was in one of his classes, and I was really tired. I'd been up till like 4 a.m, and I'm sort of not paying attention. And he calls me up. He says, "Mr. Jones," he was a German guy. He said, "Mr. Jones, would you like to come up and explain the Kirchhoff's theorem?" Of course, I didn't know what the hell he'd been talking about. So, I get up there and make the blackboard and make a complete fool of myself. So stuff like that going on. But while I was in the Liverpool scene, I mean, that was an important period because it was still learning how to play. I'm still learning how to play to this day, but back then really dealing with more with fundamentals. And a saxophone player in Liverpool scene introduced me to Charles Mingus. He had a Charles Mingus record and played it for me, and I was like, wow, this is some cool stuff. So at that point, I started getting into listening to more jazz. And I'd also remember going to see a gig by Alexis Corner. I don't know if you're familiar with him. And he was playing in a trio, and the rhythm section was Danny Thompson on bass and Terry Cox on drums, who were later with Pentangle, the band Pentangle. So they were playing this. I mean, Alexis Corner was a blues guy, so folk blues, but the rhythm section was very syncopated and kind of jazzy. And I was listening to this stuff, and I thought, wow, this is some cool stuff, because it had a lot of syncopation, and it's kind of new to me. So I started drifting into, rather than listening to rock and roll and R&B, I started listening to more jazz. So, it was ongoing education, really, but sort of shifting and getting a little wider as time went along.
And I'm back to the echo again for some reason. I wanted to ask you about Charles Mingus. So upright bass. You were still playing fretted bass at that time, or were you already fretless? Or at what point did you get into fretless bass?
I played a fretted bass from 1962 up to 1974. And in 74, we all got a publishing deal, and we got a 200 quid publishing advance. And it so happened I looked in the Melody Maker, which is the music paper at the time that most people read, in the ads in the back. I saw somebody was selling a Fender fretless Precision for 200 quid. So I went up to North London where this guy was and looked at the bass, and it was really good condition, So I bought it, not knowing, if I was going to be able to master it or not. I bought the bass. I think Robin Lumley bought a keyboard. John Goodsall bought a fur coat with his advance. So I took the bass home and I started playing it, and I immediately, this might sound a little weird, but I immediately kind of felt at home on the thing, even though I had to work on intonation and all that stuff. I just found it very expressive, almost like singing, although I can't sing to save my life, but, it had that sort of expression about it. So by that time, Brand X had started up, although, it was really early days of Brand X, so we were not doing many gigs, but rehearsing a lot. And we had just gotten a deal with Island Records, so we were getting ready to do a record with them. And it was, I think, 6 or 7 weeks away from when I bought this bass. So I just made a determination that I want to play this bass on that record. So I spent 6 weeks, really, I worked hard on it, and then used it on that first Brand X record.
So that's unorthodox behavior.
Yeah.
It's an amazing record.
Yeah, people, a lot of people say it's their favorite record.
I still remember when it came out, because I think around that time, I guess that was 75, 76, 74, 75, somewhere in there. But I remember, because I was way into fusion at the time, and Mahavishnu and Weather Report and Herbie Hancock and Return to Forever and all that kind of stuff. And also I was listening a lot to Genesis at the time. And I know that Chester Thompson had joined Genesis around that time, I believe, to play drums. Maybe it was later, but this whole kind of connection of jazz fusion and stuff. And so I think I heard that first album like on a friend's turntable, and I was like, wow, what is this? Because I hadn't really heard anything that sounded like that before, in the fusion world, so to speak. And I hate to use that word even, but Brand X is its own language, I feel, so that's an amazing record. And I think not long after that, I'm not sure how long it was, but Rock and Roll was another one, maybe the second album, right? I could have them.
I'm having trouble remembering now.
Yeah.
The second or the third, yeah. Well, Unorthodox Behavior almost never came out because we got signed by Island, which was kind of miraculous because prior to that, we used to get together I think it was Wednesday night at a rehearsal room in Clapham in South London. And there was a bunch of us, and we just used to jam, every Wednesday night. And there was a guy called Sheds. I don't know what his actual name was, but everybody called him Sheds. And he came in one Wednesday night and he said, I've hooked up an audition with Island next week. They're going to come over and check you guys out. So the next Wednesday came around, these two guys came over and we're just jamming for the most part. And, I'm bowing the bass through a wah-wah pedal. And we didn't take it very seriously. They're not going to sign us, So we just played and we messed about and noodled and jammed and improvised. And they really liked it. They signed us up. So from there on, we started rehearsing at Island's rehearsal studios in West London. And it's a bit of a long story, but we did a record for them which had vocals on it. And it was, I say the nearest comparison would be the Average White Band.
Right. Yeah.
In our case, we're below average white band. So we finished that record, and Island were quite happy with it. They were going to put it out, but we didn't particularly like it. We wanted to do an all-instrumental record with a different drummer. So we had a meeting with Chris Blackwell, and he agreed to let us do another record. We realized we need a different drummer to do that sort of stuff. Not that the original guy was bad, but stylistically he was more of a groove player. So that's when Phil Collins came into the band. So we did another record for Island, which we were really happy with. They didn't like it. They were not going to put it out. And they gave us the boot, actually. And luckily, I think this is because of the fact that Phil was now in the band, that Charisma picked it up and put the record out. But 12 months went by between recording that record and it actually coming out. So I think we recorded it in 74, but it didn't come out until sometime in 75. And it had an interesting anecdote. Quite a while later, we were doing a gig at, I think it was the Lyceum in London, and we were in the band room tuning up right before the gig. And I saw this guy walk in, older guy with a blazer with a badge on it, with some paperwork. And he hands one paper to me and hands another one to Goodsoul. And it's a subpoena. So I'm looking at subpoenaed for what, and Goodsoul is totally baffled. He's like, what the F is this, So it turned out it was Charisma had never paid Island for the recording costs for that record. So they were suing, I guess, the band. I don't know. Anyway,
wow.
But getting a subpoena like minutes before you're supposed to do a gig is a bit of a distraction, But anyway, somebody from the management was in the room, and she said, grabbed the paperwork, said, "Don't worry about it, go and play." We didn't hear any more about it, so I don't know how it resolved. But it's one of those interesting ways to tune up before a gig.
Exactly. During that time, I guess that was still around 75, 76, that era. And I was curious, because I know you were playing places like the Marquee Club and Ronnie Scott's and things like that. What was the scene like in London right then? I mean, was it really happening for jazz at that time? And progressive jazz and things like this?
Well, there was a kind of burgeoning pub club scene going on. There were lots of places to play. A lot of, and actually, when I was with the Liverpool scene in the late '60s, even there was a whole circuit you could do around the UK of sort of pub clubs, where all these bands like Jethro Tull and Chicken Shack, and they're all doing that circuit. I mean, for a couple of years, just going around the UK, and then I continued into the '70s, and in London there was a lot of pubs you could play at. There was the Marquee, as you mentioned. So the rock scene was pretty healthy. Also I think the jazz scene. Because I remember there was a lot of jazz clubs. Because I had some friends who played pretty much straight up jazz. I mean, we were kind of in the middle. Kind of mixing it up. I guess you could call it fusion, or that's can be misleading. Maurice Pert always called it fission, which used to confuse the hell out of people interviewing us here. So there were places to play. I mean, it wasn't like we were playing every night, but there were enough gigs to keep some kind of momentum going. And for the most part, it was pretty well received. I felt that people were enjoying what we did for the most part. The Marquee Club was, I don't think there was any ventilation in there. And the place used to get jam-packed. And you'd be sweating like, and I remember every time we played there was vomit in the sink. There was a sink in the band room.
Oh, that's so nice.
We were all wondering if it was ever cleaned up,
It was the same one from last time.
Yeah. But I mean, it was a funky place. But despite all of that, I mean, it was a fun place to play. I mean, it's always nice to play to an audience who like what you're doing. It's gratifying. So sometimes.
And so you hooked up with Brand X. You got Phil Collins in the band for that recording. Was he actually doing these gigs with you as well at that time? Yeah.
Well, the gigs back then were one-nighters.
Okay.
We had gigs in London and sort of just outside London, like Aylesbury. Sometimes we'd have one up in Manchester, just in the northwest of England, which is a bit of a drive.
Yeah.
But all one-nighters, and he would do those, But then later on, when we started doing American tours, where we'd be on the road for 2 months or 10 weeks or so, he couldn't do those because of, he got busy with Genesis.
Absolutely.
But then we started using other drummers,
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading recently about Chris Blackwell and Island Records and just all the stuff that he was doing. And Brand X was one of the bands that initially got funding, as you were saying. And Brian Eno became someone that you collaborated with on a couple, maybe 3 albums, I guess. And 2 of those records that come to mind are Another Green World and Before and After Science, where your bass on those records is it's even now. I mean, those records have had so much impact, I think, around the world, still to this day. I mean, DJs are playing them in clubs, and your bass is so much a part of that. The language that you had on those tracks. Can you talk a little bit about those sessions with Brian Eno, and I guess Phil was playing drums as well on those as well?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were really enjoyable. And I think the way we hooked up was I played on a record called Peter and the Wolf, which is something that Robin Lumley and Jack Lancaster put together. And it was like a sort of what they call a concept album back then, of Prokofiev stuff. So Brand X was like the core, well, at least the core rhythm section.
Yeah.
And they had guests play on the record. I think Bill Bruford, Cozy Powell, I think John Heisman did something. And Eno did something as, I think he was the wolf. They were all characters, something like that. So, and then soon after that, I got a call from him. Apparently he'd heard the mix and wondered who the rhythm section was that he was playing on, which is me and Phil. So he then called me and Phil to go in and work with him. And I remember my expectation at first was, I mean, I knew him from Roxy Music.
Oh, yeah.
At that point, and that's kind of what I was expecting. But when I got there and started working with him, I thought, wow, this guy's into some really different stuff, and it was very interesting what he was doing. And his approach was interesting because his starting points for tunes, at least on Another Green World, were very kind of vague. For example, what's the tune called?
Sky Saw.
I can't remember which one it was, but
there's another one called Over Fire Island.
Yeah, I get the two mixed up, but he went over to the piano and he hit a middle A and he went dunk 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 like that, and he said just play off of that. So we got into dunk 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 dunk. I went through a bunch of changes, which I think I kind of ripped off from Dr. John, the actual chord sequence. And I mean, it was very loose, and he seemed happy with it. And then we did some other stuff, and then he sent me the record in the mail after he'd finished it and mixed it, and I got to sit down and listen to it. And I heard that track in particular. I thought, wow, this is so cool what he did with it,
Yeah.
So he had this, I think, this talent for, he'd give you direction, but to the point where he'd let you express your own sort of interpretation. He wouldn't give you specific notes to play, but like he'd give you direction, like you'd do a take and then you listen to a few bars and he'd say, take those 2 bars you're doing there, 2 measures, and repeat them a bit more, make a groove out of that, or he'd give you direction like that.
Yeah.
So I thought the guy was quite clever, and I remember after those sessions on my way home, I had a good feeling, like it was a good day today. We did something interesting. As opposed to, sometimes you can do a session and it's like, it's kind of a bummer. You feel like you haven't done anything worth writing home about,
Well, those were incredible sessions because they're definitely timeless, and I listened to Sky Saw today, which leads off that album, and also
is that the one
Over Fire Island, which is the track you were just talking about.
Okay, Over Fire.
And they're they're just astounding tracks, and the way your bass plays a part in those tracks. And also, as we get into Before and After Science, was that a brand new session for you, or was there some stuff left over from?
No, I think Before and After Science was a brand new session. And we also did a lot of stuff with just the two of us, where I'd go in with an upright bass and an electric bass, and I'd do a track of upright bass and then overdub a track of electric bass on top of that, and just kind of, we're pretty much experimenting. And I think he used some of that stuff for music for films.
All right.
But I think a lot of stuff that we did was probably never used, you know. And I also like the way that they recorded the bass. Rhett Davis was the engineer on that stuff. And I like the way they recorded and mixed those records, you know.
Yeah, they sound so good. I mean, all those albums are just amazing. And at what point did you hook up with Brian for the Jon Hassell record? How did that come about?
Well, it was after I moved here to New York. I think it was, I can't remember the year, but the early 80s. And Brian asked me to go in and play on some stuff for Jon Hassell here in New York. I forget where the studio was, so we went in, and I remember initially it didn't look like it was going to get off to a very good start, because I was playing stuff and Jon was not happy. He was saying, you know, it's got to be more this or and I was having trouble understanding what he wanted me to play. And then Eno, I could hear the two of them talking, and Eno was saying to him, well, you know, just let him let him play, just let him do his thing. So that's what I did, and then it seemed to take actually a better direction. Stuff started getting done, and I think there's one track with Vasconcelos, the percussionist.
Nana, yeah.
Nana, right, yeah.
Yeah, and the track that I was thinking of was Chemistry, which is just, I mean, it's almost like it's just you and Jon, even though there's that might be Nana playing some water drums or something underneath of it.
I can't. I'd have to listen to that again. I can't remember how it goes, but I don't think I have that record. I have to get it.
The record we're talking about is called Fourth World Volume 1, Possible Musics, and
I don't think I have it.
Also a landmark album. So, you know, you've been on so many landmark albums that are still inspiring people now, you know, and that includes the Brand X records, you know. And
I've been lucky, I think.
Yeah.
Play with some really good people over the years.
And, you know, I think people that haven't lost track of you. I haven't lost track of you. I've been following you around for years and years and years, and you know, got to check you out with Tunnels in 2005, playing for opening for Porcupine Tree, which was that was an astounding band. And I listened to Progressivity just recently, and I had never heard that record, and it just blew me away. And it still stands. Also, it doesn't sound like it's from another era or anything. It just sounds like now, or maybe the future, perhaps. And I played it. Go ahead.
I think we did 5 records.
Tunnels, yeah.
I mean, that came about because back in the early 90s, I'd done a solo record, which was Cape Catastrophe.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in a band at the time, and I'd been going out playing by myself, you know, with a 4-track sequencer and a drum machine and you know, a lot of homemade stuff. And that started out with one gig. Elliot Sharp. I remember I'd gone to Sam Ash to buy a sequencer, and I bought this bottom of the line Roland sequencer. And I was walking out of the shop, this box under my arm, and Elliot Sharp was just on his way in, and he said, "I'm curating these gigs at the kitchen. do you want to play there? And I was, before I could respond, he saw the box on my arm and he said, you could use all that stuff if you want. He knew it was a sequencer. So I said, okay. So I hooked up like a 45-minute set and did that gig at the Kitchen. Then I got offered gigs at the old Music Factory and Brandeis University. There was one in Chicago. So I did that for a while, but after a while I started missing being in a band. I wanted to play with people again.
Yeah.
So I tried to put a band together to do that catastrophe material. So, and I'd also met Frank Katz, who was a great drummer, and Mark Wagner, Van Manakis. So we put Tunnels together. And we did that first record, which had some of that material on it from Cape Catastrophe. But then we started writing new stuff and doing more records. And it went on for a few years to the point where, for me, it kind of run out of steam. We'd sort of plateaued and it was starting to drift a little bit. So I thought, it's time to do something else at that point. But, we got some stuff done.
Well, amazing stuff, and I would encourage everybody to go out and find those records, the Tunnels albums, and they're amazing, and they're also, I think they're just so well recorded as well. Your bass sounds amazing, the band sounds amazing, and so moving, jumping all over the place. There was another album I wanted to ask you about, which I was always curious about your work with David Sylvian, and there is a particular record called Alchemy, an Index of Possibilities, and you played on the entire side called Words of a Shaman, along with Holger Zuke and maybe Jon Hassell.
I remember out of the blue, I got a call from a lady that worked for Virgin, and I think it was a Wednesday, and she called up, said, "Can you play on David Sylvian record?" I said, "Yeah, okay." She said, "Well, we're in London." I think she said, "Can you leave tonight?" I mean, it was really fast. I mean, I literally had to pack a bag and grab a toothbrush and get on a plane. So I remember I flew overnight to Heathrow, Gatwick. And a guy came and picked me up at the airport. And I thought I was going to go to a hotel and sleep for a little bit. Because I can't sleep on planes,
Yeah.
But the guy took me straight to the studio and and I was so tired. So
That's crazy.
I mean, I played, and I was so tired. I didn't feel like I could focus on the stuff. I mean, the stuff there was nothing wrong with the material. It was just I was so knackered,
Yeah.
So I did the best I could. And I think I came back to New York like the following day.
Wow. That's crazy.
So I'm not sure what they used. I mean, I still haven't really listened to those records, so I don't know how much of it they used or how much of it was any good. I mean, like I said, at the time, I felt like I was not hitting the mark,
Yeah.
So some sleep would have helped.
That's almost an impossible situation to be in, to fly overseas and then either have to perform a concert or go to a studio and be creative.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Percy, last August we got to play together for the first time, and this was something that was put together by Leo from Moon June Records, and the four of us got to play, which is Kenny Grohowski and Alex Skolnick, yourself, and myself, and we were all masked, and this recording happened, and Marcus Reuter mixed it and mastered it, and it sounds really great. I wanted to get your point of view from that night, what it was like to during that period of time, the lockdown showing up, and essentially we improvised 2 full sets that night to one person in the room.
Yeah.
And how that was, because, it was like a first time musical meeting for us. I think the same with you and Alex, and of course you had been playing with Kenny for quite a while.
Right. I think I met Alex very briefly prior to that. We did a gig in Virginia with Jane Geddes' band.
All right.
Which Alex was in. So I met him briefly there.
All right.
And I think I met you at the Tritone in Philly, right?
Yeah, many times. Yeah.
Years ago, yeah. But I mean, we never played together before. And so, I mean, I was a bit nervous because, it was improv.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'd never played with you and Alex before. I'd played with Kenny, of course. So I had no idea what was going to come out of it all. So I remember we started playing like well before they started recording.
Yeah, like a sound check or something.
It was actually a good sound check. So I remember that by the time we got to actually recording, we'd sort of had a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Sort of, in a way, So I was feeling a bit more comfortable, and then it just went along, and I mean, we played for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
It didn't seem like 2 hours.
Yeah, we took a break between for I think 15 minutes, and then came back and played another.
So I thought that was a good sign that all that time had gone by and it didn't feel like it. As opposed to sometimes you can play for 10 minutes some tortuous stuff, and it feels like a century, So it wasn't like that. So
yeah, it was quite amazing. I mean, I think we all maybe were feeling the same way you were, like, wow, what's going to happen? And, and also 2 guitar players playing together that have never played together. And, 2 guitar players in any band sometimes can be crazy. And I just felt like this band had this, first of all, great listening.
You took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, everybody was listening, which, and that's a big deal. It's important. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was. I felt that there was a really great chemistry with this band, and the atmosphere that was happening, and yeah, like you said, we were in the zone the whole time. I felt like we were in the zone, like in some kind of atmospheric space, and amazing playing occurred, and it was such a great night for me, to drive up from Philly and get to play with all you guys. And
good.
So I'm looking forward to this album coming out. And these.
Yeah, when does it come out? Is it June or July? Really?
I'm not sure. I think it might be early July right now. There's no set date yet, but I do know that that Leo's booking a few dates right now, and I think there's 3 dates that have been confirmed, and he's trying to get a couple more. So that's exciting to think that we're going to be able to get to play some gigs in front of some people. So I'm really psyched about that.
Right. Yeah, me too. Sorry.
Hello.
Okay. My wife picked it up. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. The only other things I wanted to talk to you about was, I know you had mentioned that you have an electrical engineering degree, and from time to time when we would talk, you would say you would be checking out thunderstorms and lightning and following earthquakes. And is this something that you do daily with the weather and just kind of the climate of the world, or checking into that stuff?
Yeah. I studied electronic engineering. I didn't get a degree. I left after 2 years, and actually started working with the Liverpool scene full time.
Yeah.
But it is very useful, all that stuff. So I got into ham radio when I was a teenager, and there was a local guy in Wales who taught me a lot about communications and propagation and electronics and everything generally. And my father would take me over to this guy's house, like on a Sunday afternoon, and drop me off. And I'd spend like 3 hours hanging out with the guy, and then he'd come and pick me up. And this guy taught me a lot of stuff. And he also was a musician. He played in a dance band as well.
All right.
So we had a lot in common. And then, later on I went to Liverpool University and I got more education. So I've been into just generally, electromagnetism, how radiation travels, through space, and not just electromagnetic stuff, but even acoustic waves, mechanical waves. I've always been interested in how this stuff moves around and propagates. And so I've been a radio ham for quite a while. And, I like to use Morse code. People laugh at me. They say, Morse. They say, why don't you get the internet, I know it's a lot more efficient, but I just love the freedom of shortwave radio, because you don't have to pay any provider. You can talk to someone in New Zealand, and all you're paying for is the electricity bill, plus the propagation. You hear interesting things like weird echoes, and the whole science of it is still fascinates me. But then the weather thing. I had an experience in Wales when I was about 9 years old. We lived on a farm, and I remember sitting at the kitchen table reading the Beano, I think, and it was a thunderstorm had just pretty much ended. And all of a sudden, there was this bright flash and a horrendous bang, and I remember the light bulb, which is right over my head, exploded. Wow. And my mother, who was washing dishes, went flying across the kitchen. So lightning had struck the telephone wires right where they entered the building, and it trashed the telephone. The telephone was on a wall, and the wallpaper was just black from the floor right up to the ceiling. And it got into we weren't on the grid. We had a generator and some batteries for lighting, so it got into the wiring in the house. Every light bulb in the house just disappeared. And curiously, all the caps, the screw-on caps on the light switches had just disappeared, just blown off.
Wow.
And it got into the plumbing. I mean, my mother got a really severe shock, So after that point, I started getting interested in lightning and atmospheric electricity generally.
Yeah.
And of course, that links up with climate. And the climate's definitely changing.
Yeah.
I follow that. And looking for linkages between climate and lightning activity and solar activity and climate. And I mean, they're all interconnected, So, and doing Morse code, I think it's kind of musical too.
Absolutely.
So all this stuff, to me, it's all interconnected. And, I never lose interest in those subjects,
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about climate change during this last year while we were locked down? Did you notice that things got better, or because less people were driving and traveling?
Well, the first thing I noticed was the air quality. I mean, here it abruptly got cleaner. It was like being out in the country again. The air was fresher, cleaner. That was the immediate thing I noticed. And then I don't know how it affected climate. There was less air travel.
Yeah.
So less water vapor getting put up into the stratosphere. Because you have to wonder if contrails affect the climate. Because, they reflect sunlight.
Yeah.
And heat, So I don't know whether the lockdown actually affected the climate. Because it was relatively short term,
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody probably knows.
So here we are. It's 2021, and we're starting to open up, and we're starting to put our toes outside and getting out into the world again.
It's
slowly opening.
It's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Which is a relief, because it could have gone on, the way it was last year. That scenario could have continued, and I hate to think what the situation would be.
Yeah. So Percy, it's been amazing to chat with you and hang out. And
thanks for inviting me in.
Yeah, and hearing these stories, I'm sure we could go on and on. I'm sure there's so many stories, and I look forward to when we tour chatting a bit more about stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of quite comical stuff.
As always, right?
Depending on your sense of humor,
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy experiences over the years. Some good, some bad.
And so much amazing music, and I want to thank you for all that, because it's definitely inspired me over all these years. And
good to know.
And so many people
trying to keep it going, because it's a never-ending.
Yeah.
It doesn't end.
Yeah, it continues.
I mean, it does eventually, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a constant. It's a never-ending challenge, really.
Yeah, to keep it going.
Yeah, and to keep it interesting, or try and keep it interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, listen, I look forward to seeing you really soon.
Yeah, in July.
Yeah, so it's coming up fast, and and the record will be coming, and so there'll be a lot of fun stuff coming up, and so everybody should definitely check into to your site. Do you have a website, or is that just Facebook that people can check you out at?
I did have a website, but I let it go because nobody was looking at it, so I just used Facebook.
Okay. So check Percy out at Facebook.com, and
there's a www.percyjones.com, but that's a lumberyard in Nebraska. So
check that out. It might be cool.
Yeah,
some good wood.
I have some good stuff,
That sounds great. And yeah, so we have some shows coming up. I know we're playing the Sellersville Theater. And we are playing Daryl's house. That's in Pawling, New York. And we'll be playing Kennett Flash, which is in Wilmington, Delaware. And I believe those dates roughly are like the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, somewhere in there, or 25th.
Yeah, I think so.
But they're going to be widely out there, so everybody will find out when they can, or just go to those venues now and go to the websites. I think you can probably just buy tickets now. And I don't know what the situation is in terms of how many people or how many tickets are available, but
yeah, I don't know either.
Either way, it's going to be a fun adventure. And
I mean, at least it's a gig as opposed to
it's a gig
sitting in here,
not in the house.
Yeah.
So hey Percy, have a really great evening, and great to hang.
You too. Yeah, thanks.
And I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Cheers to everybody.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, searching for Sparks today with Tim Motzer and Percy Jones. And be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Bye everybody.